welcome to the, what day is it? May 12th. General regular session meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. There are, hang on, sorry, I just lost my president's agenda thing here. You think I should know it by now, right? Okay, sorry about that. I just don't want to say anything wrong. Due to COVID-19 and in accordance with Alameda County Health Order 2010, or 20-10, issued April 29th, 2020, with the Governor's Executive Order N29-20, which suspends portions of the Brown Act. This meeting will be conducted entirely via teleconference. In compliance with these orders, a physical location has not been provided for the meeting, and these measures will only apply during the period in which state or local public health officials have imposed or recommended social distancing. The Planning and Legislative Human Resources Committees met earlier today and will report under item 12. Directors for roll call, Directors Coleman, Katz, Mooney, McIntosh, Mellon, Patterson, and myself, Marguerite Young, are participating via teleconference. Madam Secretary, could you please call the roll?
Directors Coleman.
Present.
Katz.
Present.
Lenny.
Here.
McIntosh.
Here.
Mellon.
Present.
Patterson.
Here.
President Young.
I am here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for all. Justice for all.
Okie dokie. Alex Coe, I think, has a presentation from the Association, from the American Society of Civil Engineers.
I had to remove the mute on the mic. So today's presentation, this morning we had an opportunity at the Planning Committee to hear an update on our education program and also on the wastewater tours program, the tours that are being done at Wastewater. And so today we also have an opportunity to recognize the district's receipt of the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, or NACWA, award to EBMUD for our 2020 Public Information and Education program and for the wastewater treatment plant tour program. The district's tour program offers free tours of the main wastewater treatment plant for residents and students to learn about wastewater treatment and EBMUD's protection of public health in the San Francisco Bay. The walking tours are guided by a diverse group of EBMUD employees, including operators, engineers, and administrative staff. Tours are typically fully booked and receive excellent reviews. This award recognizes the tour program's growth and wide reach, providing tours for high school field trips, professional groups, and members of the public. In 2019, tours were given to over 1,000 attendees, including representatives from agencies such as the U.S. EPA, the California Air Resources Board, the California Department of Resources, Recycling and Recovery, the City of Honolulu, the China National Environmental Monitoring Center, and numerous grade schools, colleges, professional schools, and to retirees and the public. So this is an opportunity to thank the organization, our staff, for great work teaching about pollution prevention and sharing the many ways the district is working towards sustainability through production of electricity, recycled water, and nutrient-rich biosolids for beneficial use. This award, which you can see on the screen, is being presented virtually to the following, with receipt by the following representatives of the tour program: Joe Barge, Assistant Wastewater Shift Supervisor; Kristen Font, Wastewater Control Representative; Phoebe Groh, Supervising Wastewater Control Representative; James Hake, who provided the presentation this morning, Assistant Engineer, Matilda Leong, Senior Administrative Clerk, Christine Pagtakan, Wastewater Control Inspector 2, Sarah Plummer, Assistant Engineer, and Camilo Rojas Lavado, Graphic Designer 2. So please join me in congratulating the staff and the district for this award that we've received.
Very excellent. Thank you. There are no announcements from closed session. Do we have people? I guess we don't have anybody to speak, do we? Or not really.
Well, that's your next thing. We do the presentation.
No. I know that. I'm talking about from the presentation. Is there somebody? There's nobody lined up to say anything. Is that right?
That's correct, President Young.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to be sure we weren't icing any well-deserved recipient of the award from being able to say something about it. Okay. So there are no announcements from closed session. For public comment, if members of the public are calling in and wish to speak on an item that is not on our agenda, the secretary will take your name one at a time, and then we'll call an alphabetical grouping and ask that you please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. The secretary will state each speaker's name, cue you when it is your turn to speak, and when your time has concluded. Comments on agenda items will follow the same process and will be heard when the item is up for consideration. If you are not speaking under public comment but are on the line listening, please mute your phone to minimize background noise. With that, is there anyone on the line for public comment whose last name begins with the letters A as in apple through F as in Frank? Okay, is there anyone on the line whose last name begins with the letter G as in Gary through L as in Larry? Okay, how about names beginning with the letter M as in Mary to R as in Robert? Okay, and finally, the letter S as in Sam to Z as in zebra. Okay, so I have no one for general public comment. That moves us along to the consent calendar, where we have 7 items for consideration.
I'll move the 7 items, 1 through 7. This is John.
Okay, let me just ask: is there anyone who has in the public who has a comment about any items on the consent calendar that would lead us to pull that? Okay, so John has made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, hearing no members of the public wishing to comment on the item, we will now have a roll call vote on the consent calendar.
Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Aye.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes. Okay, all items on the consent calendar have been approved. We'll now move on to determination of discussion. First up is our is item number 8, a legislative update from Marlene Dumaine.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have a written legislative report for you this week. We want to start with a little bit of an overview of what's going on at the state level to put this in context. When we last spoke, I was indicating that the bill process had not sorted yet. What the priorities for the legislature were still sorting out because of the recess. The Senate and Assembly are both back. They're starting to hold policy committee hearings and budget hearings. We are still looking at focus areas of COVID, housing and homelessness, and wildfire as key focus areas. What's changed since we last spoke is the budget situation for the state. The governor will be releasing his May revise on Thursday, and he is signaling it is bleak. The rumors last week were about a $35 billion deficit. What we learned later is we are now looking at about a $54 billion deficit. And that is about 1/3 of the state's general fund. This year was projected to be around $153 billion. So what's happening within the administration right now is all the agencies are being asked to look at serious cuts. And this definitely will affect the bill process in terms of what bills are ultimately going to be successful. Anything that has spending, they will take a very, very close look at. We do expect to see a lot more clarity from both houses really this week and next week as the policy committees meet. And though a lot of bills are getting referred, many of those bills are actually not making it to the committee process. The committees are choosing not to hear bills. So we'll know much more in about 2 weeks. So we do plan to bring more bills to you for position after this board meeting. For the purposes of today, we do have one for a position, and this is SB 1386. This fits in the wildfire category and also would have an effect on East Bay MUD. This measure would clarify provisions of Prop 218 that allow a water agency to charge fire protection services as property-related fees. And the reason this is important right now is that 81 water agencies, including East Bay MUD, have been sued on this topic. And so this bill is intended to get that clarification in statute to protect or help protect against future litigation. This bill is authored by Senator Borlaug, who is basically considered to be a tough crowd on anything related to taxes and fees, and he agrees this is an important issue. The sponsors, who are Irvine Ranch Water District and San Diego County Water Authority, are really doing their homework on this to make sure the bill is a priority and it is something that it should get a welcome reception in the legislature. So we are recommending a support position on this measure today.
And Marguerite, in the Ledge Committee this morning, all three members voted in support of 1386.
Yes.
Are there any questions from other board members? Okay, is there a motion to?
This is John, I'll move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Any public comment? Okay, then I think we are ready for a roll call vote.
Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes. Okay, next up, I think we have the.
President Young?
Oh, you have more on the.
I do. I was just waiting a pause there. A little bit more at the state and a what hopefully is a positive federal update as well. At the state level, I just wanted to let you know the legislative report has a summary of executive orders that have happened since the last time we talked that have relevance to East Bay MUD. Since the ledge report was written, 3 more executive orders have come out, so we're going through those. Another one was released today. And then also today, the Senate unveiled its approach to economic recovery. This is at the state level. And this is going to be part of how they view budget negotiations going forward, and it looks like a combination of a stimulus approach and a relief approach. And the number that they're tossing around right now is about $25 billion. So we'll dig into that and have more information for you the next time we get together. On the federal side, to date, we've seen 3.5 COVID relief packages totaling about $3.6 trillion in aid. East Bay MUD has been directly advocating for relief that is specific to water and wastewater utilities that are special districts, and also for rate assistance for folks that are having a hard time. The four things that we've been specifically advocating for are outlined in the legislative report, but I'll run through them real quickly. One is rate assistance. One is extending the payroll tax credit to pay for the enhanced leave that was in one of the prior packages, to extend that to special districts and other local government entities, including any enhanced benefits for essential frontline workers, including water and wastewater utility workers, and funding those benefits federally. And then lastly, expanding the COVID relief fund for local government to also apply to special districts. So those are the four things we have been advocating directly. We also assembled a coalition of water agencies that represent over 50% of California's population, and also have been communicating with congressional leadership through that coalition. We use that coalition to secure the support of CASA and ACWA to help with this effort. The ACWA help is particularly important in communicating on the Republican side of the House for these asks, particularly on the ratepayer assistance piece. This morning, the House Democrats unveiled their proposal for the fourth package of relief. And I will caution, there's a long way to go. This is the House Dems, and they don't have the Republicans on board. However, it's positive in terms of the things we've been seeking. Just real briefly, it is a $3 trillion package. So this package on its own almost equals the prior 3.5 packages that have been passed and signed into law. There is a proposal for ratepayer assistance. It's about $1.5 billion. It looks like this proposal would extend the payroll tax credit to special districts. The COVID relief fund, unfortunately, would not include special districts, but it would provide additional assistance to state and local government. Yesterday, Governor Newsom announced that the Coalition of Western states had asked for this package to the tune of about $1 trillion, and that ask is reflected in this package. So indirectly, there should be some relief that would go to the state and help offset state budgetary concerns. There is an acknowledgement for essential workers in this as well. I don't know the details at this point. I will tell you this came out just before this meeting started, and there's about 1,800 pages to wade through here. But we will be looking through this package. We're continuing to communicate with our delegation and leadership on this, and we'll have more information in the next week or so. Right now, Senate Republicans are saying that they want more time to consider. The House vote may happen Friday, and we would expect, if that does happen, to see votes on the Senate side perhaps next week. Any questions?
I have a question, if I can.
Yep.
I meant to ask earlier in our Ledge Committee, Marlene, and I forgot, and we were talking about the budget deficit, and it reminded me. In the past, the state has looked at enterprise districts such as ours and others as a source of funding to help bridge their budget deficit. Has there been any discussion in Sacramento this year yet about doing that?
That's a great question. The two areas that have historically been looked at are property tax revenue for the enterprise special districts and reserves. And so far, we have not heard anything. However, I think it's something that we need to and will be paying very close attention to and working to prepare ourselves to defend against that. And the reason I think that the risk is fairly acute is in prior years when the states had a big deficit, they can take care of a lot of it through internal borrowing. So they look at some of those special fund accounts and they basically move money around and can use that to offset a deficit. This time around, the special funds are suffering as well. So the state's options may be pretty limited on what they can do. So far, no, but we are definitely have our ear to the ground on that issue.
And the one fund that we receive interest on, I don't remember the acronym, but local something, we have money invested in there. In the past, I think they looked at that as a source of revenue to borrow from. Is that protected now? I can't think of the exact name of the fund, but it's a local fund that you can make, agencies can put money in and earn interest on.
Yeah,
okay, we can check into that.
It's
Is that like a local government investment pool or something?
Yes, it's like that.
Right, local agency investment, LAIF is the term. And I know that Sophia is on the line, and she might be able to respond to that because we just talked about it in terms of an additional investment option for our cash. And we viewed that it was protected, and while there was a threat, it really wasn't really viable for the state to come and take our money.
Hi, this is Sophia. Speaking. And so at our last Finance Committee meeting, we had added CalTrust as a new investment vehicle. We've been an investor in LAIF for many, many years. And yes, per all of our understanding, both with the new CalTrust fund that we've added and with the LAIF fund, that, the state, even if it took its own funds out of LAIF, it wouldn't be possible for them to do that there are protections that are in place, that it's not conceivable at this time that they would ever be able to take those funds out of that. But certainly if there were ever any changes that were made, we would be made aware of those changes, and we might have to revisit whether or not that continues to be a safe and good investment vehicle for the district.
So, Sophia, based on that, if they can't take it now unless they make changes, would we have ample time if they're to make changes to move our money elsewhere? Or it has to be done legislatively, I guess? It can't be done by rulemaking?
That is our understanding, Director Coleman, but in light of your question and in light of the continuing difficulty and circumstances, we will confirm that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. So there's not a vote for this federal piece?
No, this is just information item.
Okay. Well, let's keep our fingers crossed for a good outcome there. Okay, are we now? I think we're moving on to item 9.
Yes, that's correct, President Young, and we have a brief presentation for the board that our Director of Finance, Sophia Scotto, will provide.
Thank you, Sophia.
Okay, so here we are. I think I'm off of mute now, so hopefully everyone can hear me. And this is just a brief presentation. We do every off year of our budget cycle provide the board with this same presentation that provides the information with respect to the non-Prop 218 rates and charges. The slide is advancing, and I didn't push the button, so I'm not sure why that is. Risha, can we go backwards?
There you go.
Thank you. All right, great. So let's advance to the next slide. Or
you go ahead. You have control.
I can do it? Okay, great, super. So with respect to prior board actions, I just wanted to remind the board that we did send out our Prop 218 notice, and that was for both fiscal years 20 and 21. That was last spring. The mailing date was April 26th, and we held a public hearing on June 11th. And at that public hearing, we did adopt rates for both fiscal years 20 and 21. The rates for fiscal year 20 went into effect on July 1, and without any board decision otherwise, the rates that we have passed will be implemented on July 1, 2020, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on an upcoming slide. So with regards to the current actions, in the off year, we look at our non-Prop 218 rates. So these are the charges that we implement for a whole variety of different services. So including our upcountry, recreation fees, all of those kinds of things are non-Prop 218 fees. So anything that's not specifically for water or wastewater services. And so one of the actions that we have to take is to file a report and a recommendation from staff. And that goes through the general manager to the board. And those are for any revisions to our water and wastewater system schedule of rates and charges, again, that are not subject to Prop 218. And so today we are filing that board, and we are setting a public hearing date for Tuesday, June 9th of 2020. And that's a regular board meeting. And at that meeting, we would, again, consider the report and the recommendations inside. We are planning to, before that June 9th date, hold a board workshop, and that will be on May 26th. And during that workshop, we're going to cover the strategic plan for the next cycle here. And we're also going to talk about our FY21 mid-cycle budget. So sort of where do we see that we are at this point, given all that's happened and all that we know at this point in the COVID. And we're going to talk about what those rates might look like and what alternatives might be. And so then at that point, the public hearing, any feedback that we receive from the board would be incorporated. And then June 9th would be the public hearing and adoption, again, for those non-Prop 218 rates. So moving on to the next slide. With respect to the proposed rates and charges that are, again, non-Prop 218 to be revised, things like account establishment charges, our water main extension charges, a couple of these, we're in a process where we put a phase in over like a 3-year phase in. Any of our updated Public Records Act fee schedules, all of these things that are updated to reflect our actual costs today and our labor costs today are all included in here. So moving on to our next slide. So again, we have got some revisions also to our service regulations, and so we'll talk more about those when the time comes, but public fire hydrants, some non-potable water service requirements, water efficiency requirements. With respect to next steps, really I would say the major milestone is going to be our board workshop on May 26th. We continue to incorporate all of the information that we are receiving from our counterparts, obviously, in operations and maintenance as they're reading meters and bringing that information back. The information that we have from the AMI metered subsection of our total metered population, and of course checking in with our peers in the region and across the nation to really understand what the impacts are going to be as we know them today and as we might project them into the future given where we are today. All of that will be presented on May 26th, and then the public hearing on rates and charges would take place on June 9th. And then again, the water and wastewater rates would take effect on July 1 unless decided on otherwise. So that's it from me.
This is John, if I could ask a question. I know that we did the 218 for last cycle. If by chance the board were to look at making some changes, and I don't know if they will, or if they're going to consider, but perhaps spending less in light of what we're looking at with the financial situation everywhere, do we have to go back to 218? I wouldn't know if we were to increase the rates, we would have to, but to decrease, we do not, correct?
Your understanding is correct, Director Coleman. Okay,
thank you. And the last thing I have, and it's going to sound really weird. Yes, I read the packet. Well, I got to advance my page here. I think it's on page 212. I noticed that under the fees, that we charge for dogs to go into our parks, except for Lafayette Reservoir, which I don't have a problem with, but I just was wondering, why is one facility not having a charge for people to bring their dogs in and all the others do? It doesn't make any sense.
It's a great question, and I don't know the answer, but we'll look into it for you.
Okay, thank you.
Director Coleman, it's a challenge at Lafayette Reservoir, as you are very familiar with it, given the many points of entry for staff to enforce fee payment for dogs. That's really the reason. Yeah.
I figured there's a logical thing, but when I was going through it, I saw it and I went back and looked at all the other facilities and I go, wait, they charge for those, they don't here. And I'm fine with that. And maybe we don't everywhere. I don't know if it's a huge financial resource where people bring their pet to the San Pablo Reservoir or Comanche where we're charging. Just something to think about in terms of being uniform.
All right, thank you. We'll have that conversation.
Okay, are there any other dog or otherwise related questions to the...
Wait, I had one on cats.
I think you charge for cats.
Bobcats.
Related to the schedule for the hearing, we do have a workshop coming up next time that will go through this. So if there are items or things that you want to make sure are raised with regard to that, now would be an appropriate time to suggest those, or you should get them to Alex sooner rather than later.
Marguerite?
Yes, Frank.
Two things. One, I see that in Schedule D we're upping the water service installation charges quite a bit. And last year we put that in a freeze. And I think that that's one of those things that is helping us contribute to part of the problem on housing. And I will definitely be wanting to have some discussion on that when we get into this on the 26th. And the second is much more serious, and that is, with everything that's going on, should we be increasing rates on July 1st?
So can I suggest that we're not actually having that's framed as a question? It's not something I think that we are set up to have a discussion or action about. So I just want to be careful about, Craig, if you have...
Well, this is determination and discussion, but I know we're having the workshop on the 26th, and I think it's the earlier we bring this up rather than waiting till we get around to the 26th, the better it is. That way we can be doing some very thoughtful stuff, and staff will be prepared.
I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that staff is prepared to present a number of options and considerations for us to raise, to consider.
Yeah. So this is Sophia, and so one thing that I just wanted to share, Director Mellon, was that at this time there is no proposed change in the FCC. So you're correct, continuing to hold on changes in the FCC. The water service installation charge is a separate charge, and that was one that actually has to do with like physically connecting the connection. So, but the actual system capacity charges is not changing per the direction of the board from last year. And then the second question with regards to Director Young's comments, that's correct. Staff will be bringing some alternatives for board consideration on May 26th.
I had one last item, and that was the tiny houses issue. I've been lobbied by a couple of individuals asking how East Bay MUD can contribute to making that successful, as opposed to each individual tiny house being subject to water connection charges in the fashion as we currently have. And again, I'm just doing this in the capacity of saying these are things that I'd rather give us a heads up on now than wait till the day of the hearing or the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? This will be a very important hearing. Anybody from the public that might be listening, please tune in. Or not here, the hearing, I mean, the workshop on the 26th, actually, is what I was referring to as being more informative than the hearing probably on the 9th. So obviously, people should do that.
Getting back to the connection charges, it sure would be helpful to understand the components that create the fees that are attendant to that. I'm looking at page 4A, and so what creates a $9,100 charge for 1 inch and smaller line, and what's the labor component, what's the materials component? I'm going to be wanting to look at that pretty carefully.
Thank you.
Okay. Hearing nobody else stepping up. We have Dave Briggs on tap for item 10.
No, an action is
You
necessary.
need to take action on items 9.
Yes. I'm sorry. Do I have a motion? Sorry. A motion on the setting the date for the public hearing on Tuesday, June 9th.
So moved.
Second that. Motion by Director McIntosh, seconded by Director Linney, I think.
That's
Is that
correct.
right? Okay. Any more discussion? Any public comment? Okay. Madam Secretary, roll call vote.
Directors
Please.
Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Abstain.
Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes. Okay. A little confused, but that's okay. Moving on to item 10, related to action, with an action item as well, related to the Mokelumne
Are
Aqueduct
you going to promote?
system routine maintenance project.
Right.
Dave Briggs?
Yes. So recognize, board members recognize this was an item that was discussed this morning in the Planning Committee, and we had support from the entire Planning Committee, and Dave Briggs is ready to give a summary to the full board this afternoon.
Go ahead, Dave.
Good afternoon, President Young and members of the board. Happy to be here. And Risha, remind me again, am I in control or are you?
You're in control.
Okay, great. So yeah, as the general manager was saying, staff gave an overview of the CEQA document that provides the coverage for our routine maintenance along the Mokelumne Aqueduct right away. And just to provide a little bit of context for the CEQA document, our activities and our actions along the right-of-way, by and large, have not changed over the years, and the permit process is, by and large, invariant. But what's new this time around is that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is now requiring more extensive CEQA analysis prior to the permit renewal. So we'll go over the parameters of that document and lead you up to the actions being considered under item number 10. So I'm on slide 3, where we see the span of the aqueducts covering from Part E to the eastern part of the Bay Area, going over the 80 miles. The aqueducts span 2 California Department of Fish and Wildlife regions. Each of those regions has a separate permit. The CEQA document covers and provides analysis for each of them. So the CEQA document will help us renew each of them. And taking a step back, the district has 2 other routine maintenance agreements, 2 other RMAs that cover the watershed properties and the activities there. Those will be brought to the district separately under a separate item at a later time. But just so you know, there are other routine maintenance agreements that we operate with. A routine maintenance agreement is really a streamlined permitting process. It allows for a much less level of effort both on the permittee side and the regulatory side. as both parties really realized over the years that work that is the same, done the same way, during the same time of year, in the same area, and when the species, the status of the species and the value of the habitat are also invariant over the years, both sides realized that there was a better way to streamline permitting and avoid the activity-by-activity permit application and approval process. So in exchange for the general permit coverage that's offered by an RMA, the other side of that coin is that the permitted activities are exceptionally narrow, very specific, precisely defined activities in very precisely defined geographic areas. So that's the give and take associated with an RMA. And in our case, what's permitted are very light maintenance activities that we conduct along the right-of-way between here and Pardee, and they're listed here on the slide, which I'm going to move so I can make sure I have the slide number, on slide 4 for your reference, and including vegetation control, riprap replacement, erosion control, and light culvert replacement. So we made sure that the MND, the mitigated neg deck, analyzed various potential impacts, knowing that we have a large swath of property, over 80 miles or so. We have work in sensitive ecological zones, and at times we have shallow excavations. So we made great effort to make sure that the document analyzed various types of potential impacts associated with riparian habitat, wetland habitat. We have a plethora of special status species in the right-of-way that are commonly found in the Delta and the Central Valley and the East Bay. We made sure that we had every potential impact covered there. And because of the shallow excavation that we conduct from time to time, that brought in the cultural resources and the paleontological effects as well. We have neighbors on the right-of-way. We have more and more every day. So the right-of-way that's about 100 feet wide snakes its way through various urban communities, Lafayette, Walnut Creek, Pleasant Hill, Concord, and Stockton, and our neighbors are growing. So we had to make sure we analyzed for noise and dust to make sure we had those areas covered. And with wildfire risk, we now have inclusion in our practices spark arresting devices on our mechanized equipment to make sure we don't inadvertently ignite a wildfire. Listed on slide 6 is the CEQA checklist and in the categories as organized here. And you'll notice that in 9 areas, 9 environmental factors, following the project activities following mitigation were the impacts associated with those activities were rendered to a less than significant level following the mitigation. And if you were to look at our mitigation monitoring and reporting plan, I think you would be impressed by its heft and its size. There's a lot of detail in there. And a lot of that really are things that most of it really, are things that we've historically done. They're part of our best management practices. We were early implementers of various practices. A lot of the activities that are in the CEQA document are by and large a reflection of what we're already doing and are just a convenient place to memorialize them. But to highlight the cornerstone of the mitigation efforts, certainly staff training so they can recognize certain species. A biological survey prior to work being conducted is essential to make sure there's nothing in harm's way, and an abundance of avoidance and minimization measures are also incorporated into the mitigation monitoring plan and reporting plan. There are mechanisms in our CEQA document to provide for compensation if permanent impacts occur. We don't anticipate that happening, but the CEQA document does cover that should we ever need them. Outreach was extensive for the mitigated neg deck. We certainly consulted with the primary regulatory agencies who will be issuing these permits, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, both regions, direct outreach with local agencies, including Native American tribes, as well as posting in various places and publishing in various places to make sure that we reached everybody that might have a comment. Through all that, 7 comment letters were received, and they're largely binned into this half dozen or so categories. And I can tell you that after going through all those comments, none of them resulted in any substantial change to the MND or really practices that we are already by and large doing out there on the right-of-way. So from here, you have, I believe, 5 items separately listed in agenda item number 10 for you to consider. And if we do move forward, then the district will renew its permits with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Thank you. Any questions?
Marguerite, you're on mute.
Sorry. My dog's been very noisy. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any public comments on this item? Okay, prepared for a motion to act?
I'll move the item. Second.
Okay, moved by Director Linney, seconded by Director Patterson. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Linney,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes. Thank you for that report, and the item has been adopted unanimously. Item 11, the General Manager's report.
All right, so we have an update on the status of the district's efforts related to coronavirus, and Clifford Chan will make the presentation.
Good afternoon, President Young, members of the board. I'll provide a brief update on our coronavirus efforts. This first slide you've seen before, summarizing what we've been doing to help our customers out. Again, the number of customers needing service restoration has remained largely unchanged. As far as the payment plans and extensions granted, we're at 3,830 to date. But just for a point of reference, in April we've had 1,500 payment plans, which is significantly less than the average that we normally get, around 5,000. We expect that's probably due to the fact that we've suspended water service shutoffs. If you look at the 48-hour notices, we're at 15,200. But of those 15,200, 7,100 pay their bills without any further reminders. For the remaining 8,100, we did send out emails and letters to those customers, and that included a reminder to pay their bill, as well as information on how they could participate in CAP or sign up for any sort of payment plans. Since March 12th, we've accumulated $227,000 in late payment penalties. And just as a point of reference, at the end of April when I presented, we were at around $158,000 in late payment penalties. And then finally, on the CAP applications, we're at 7,370, which is higher than the average of around 7,000. So that's about a 5% growth compared to what we've seen in early 2020.
So, Clifford, just clarification on that. And Andrew, I'm assuming you're on the line as well. But so does that means that we have assessed $227,000 in late payment penalties, or that we've collected?
No, I'll just clarify that is we are keeping an accounting of how many late payments, but we have not received those late payments. So is that what you were asking, President Young? So we want to know how many late payments are going unpaid.
You want me to add?
Yeah, go ahead.
But we're not putting.
So are we billing those payments, or are we just kind of keeping a track of it on a little envelope to the side so we can say, hey, this is how much it cost us?
They have been billed. Essentially, late payments are automatically generated on the system when it reaches a certain timeline in the bill. So basically, once a bill is generated, and if a customer does not make a payment within the time frame, that late payment penalty gets automatically generated and posted on the bill. Now, some of them may have paid, and some of them may not have paid. And that's going back to the number that Clifford was referring to, that we have some customers that follow through and pay the bill without the further reminders, and then there's still that 8,000 plus that hasn't paid a bill. Now, those 7,000 that have paid a bill, they may have paid it along with a late payment penalty, but they may not, because they have basically all the way up through several days before the next bill is generated to pay their payment without incurring a late payment penalty. Does it make sense?
Maybe you can elaborate.
Not really. This is confusing to me, actually. And I was confused. So we have 39,000 accounts that late payment penalties have been assessed to. We've only had 300 people contact us asking for those late fees to be waived. But you're saying that we don't know, or you can't tell us how many people paid the late fee?
We've been actively waiving late fees when the customers are calling, requesting for assistance, and that's the 300 accounts. Now, the thing we're trying to work with is essentially not all customers are incurring a late fee because they're impacted by COVID-19. Because just put things in perspective, the district, in a typical month, we would have about 20,000 accounts would incur a late fee, and this is outside COVID-19. Now, along that line, even after these shelter in place and COVID-19, we're still seeing the same amount of numbers. So anywhere between we've been seeing anywhere between 21 to 24,000 accounts that have incurred late fees. So this is all within the range, our typical range of accounts with late fees in a 12-month period. And for an example, going back to early 2019, we have seen anywhere from in the range of 18,000 accounts to up to 24,000 accounts have late fees. So this is outside COVID-19, outside of shelter-in-place order.
May I just say that anybody who calls to express a concern, we will waive the late fee. A lot of people are not calling right now because a lot of people are not paying their water bill right now. So this will be a conversation that's going to happen more regularly if and when there's a time when we can begin asking people to pay and suggesting that we'll shut off the water if they don't pay. That's for something in the future. But in the meantime, anybody who would like to waive the late fee, they have a conversation with customer services staff, and we go through the process of waiving it. The way our computer system is structured, the customer information system is structured, it's not, we would have to go through an exercise to program and then later reprogram to actually just default to removing all late fees. So for us, not only is it sort of a question about whether is it really COVID related, and anybody who asks, we provide it, but it's also an undertaking that we haven't even embarked on to try to wholesalely eliminate all late fees. So I hope maybe that's helpful.
Yeah, we have a big conversation to have at some point down the road, I'd say.
Yes, and maybe the governor or there'll be some statewide input that will influence that.
Yeah, and just like Alex said, there's no stop and turn on button on late fees. It's all programmed in. So even if you want to stop it today, there's definitely programming issues we need to address, and we want to actually definitely track this very clearly in case that we do ask for grant or some kind of reimbursement for that. We want to be absolutely clear that that money going towards that late fee is being reimbursed for. So we want to have good bookkeeping, everything else, so we want to do this thing right.
Any other questions, comments from board members on this?
No, that answered my questions.
Okay, continue, Clifford.
So we are continuing to track the water demand. So this graph shows the water demand from February 1st through the end of May for this year and last year. And this year is still tracking similar to last year. If you look at the two horizontal red lines, that shows the 30-day average demand before the mid-March shelter-in-place order and after. And you will see a pretty significant drop in the water demand, but that's also because, if you remember, February was a very dry month, and demands were higher at that point in time. The blue horizontal line shows last year's average, 30-day average prior to mid-March, and you'll see it's just a bit below where we are after March for this year. But we are continuing to look at the AMI data to try to understand how COVID-19 is affecting the water demand. So we are seeing significant drops in certain business classes that we would expect. That includes hotels and restaurants. And we're seeing up to a 50% drop in those particular accounts from the AMI data that we do have. But we're also seeing drops in certain residential business classes. And again, that could be because of the high water demand in February is skewing some of the data that we're seeing. We're continuing to look at the AMI data through now almost the middle of May, but we're going to look at the data right now to the beginning of May, as well as the bi-monthly and monthly reading, to really get a better idea of what the impact COVID-19 and the shelter-in-place is going to have on our water demands. Water and wastewater utilities across the country, they've certainly been having difficulty getting masks, and FEMA worked with the U.S. EPA, the National Warren Network, and the American Water Works Association to get masks to utilities across the country. California received 160,000 masks, and East Bay MUD, we did volunteer to be one of the 7 points of distribution. We are the point of distribution for Region 2, which stretches from Del Norte County down to the East Bay. So we did get 75,000 masks to distribute, and if you look at the picture, if you ever wondered what 75,000 masks looks like in boxes, that's what it looks like. We got 4,000 masks. We have distributed 15,000 masks to Sacramento, 10,000 masks to Sonoma, and then 7,000 other masks have been requested from other agencies, and we're going to continue to take requests as they come to us.
And these are N95 masks?
They are not. These are cloth masks.
Oh, okay.
Just quickly on the reconstitution plan, again, that provides a framework of how we're going to return back to normal, but normal is not going to be what it was before COVID-19. This transition is going to take many months, probably over a year. The plan does include new safety guidelines from the shelter-in-place, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. We are starting the construction and maintenance activities, and that actually began yesterday. I'll point out that the prior shelter-in-place order had restrictions on the type of construction we could do. It also limited the construction to those that were immediately necessary for the operations, maintenance, and repair of our water and wastewater infrastructure. That language was removed in the current shelter-in-place order, and they largely just lifted all the restrictions on construction and maintenance. But they did, in the order, add new safety protocols that contractors and East Bay MUD would need to follow. Telecommuting is going to continue at current levels through May, and then we are going through right now and evaluating and implementing changes to the building so that as people return to the building, they can maintain proper distancing, and we make potentially cubicle modifications with plexiglass and other modifications to make sure that people have proper protections. Just quickly, this is my last slide, just to talk about the safety guidelines. So, like I mentioned, in the revised shelter-in-place orders, they did put in new protocols for construction projects. They broke up construction into large projects and small projects. Large for us is defined as projects with 5 or more people. And then if you're a large project, you have to have a site-specific health and safety plan. You also have to designate a safety compliance officer. That officer for us will typically be the supervisor on the site or the foreman. And then we also have to have a third-party job site safety accountability supervisor. That role is going to be filled by our workplace health and safety staff. We're also providing additional safety training to our staff. We've made modifications to existing work practices. So for crews working out in the field, some things will change so that they can maintain proper distancing. The order also required new signage at every entrance into a job site. So we've posted that new signage at our job sites. And they also added requirements for water and a prohibition of sharing food. So the water requirement said that we have to provide individual containers of water for staff. We don't particularly like the idea of having to provide bottled water for staff, but that's what's in the order. They went even further for both large and small projects. If people are sharing water or sharing food, we're required to send them home for the day. So we have provided bottled water for staff, but we also purchased containers for staff to use, and we're certainly encouraging them to fill up their own containers to use as opposed to having bottled water for staff. The other thing the order did prohibit is the use of microwaves. So you may or may not be aware, but on all of our field service trucks, pipelines, and distribution crews, there are microwaves on the truck, and we either removed it or put signs that they cannot use the microwave anymore.
And what's the concern there? Is that cross-contamination, or what
It's cross-contamination. So the way the order is written, they have a section on how to prevent community spread. And so in that section, it talks about people not sharing food. They also talk about really trying to limit how many people carpool together to work sites. So we put all that information in our health and safety plan, but this is all about community spread.
Okay.
Answer any other questions?
Any other questions from board members? Okay. Any comments from the public? Okay, Alex, back to you.
Yes, so board members, you also have in your materials the monthly report. And if you have any questions, I can work to answer them. And that's all I have.
Okay. We'll now move on to reports and director comments. The April 28th sustainability/energy and the finance/administration minutes are included in packets. We'll now get reports from this morning's planning committee and the legislative HR committee meetings. For planning, Director Linney.
Yes, the planning committee met this morning at 8:45 a.m. We considered 5 items, including item about the our fiscal year 2019-2020 education program, K through 12 education program, also the wastewater tour plant program update. We heard about the advanced metering infrastructure update, the item that we heard on the board meeting for the Mokelumne Aqueduct system routine maintenance project update, and then the final mitigated negative declaration. And then our 5th item was the railroad property easement acquisition in Alameda that will be coming back to the board as well.
Okay, thank you.
All relevant items. I forget exactly which ones we voted on, which ones we didn't, but all relevant items that needed a vote got a positive and unanimous vote.
Great. Okay, Director Coleman, could you give the report?
Sure. We met at the Legislature 10 this morning. All the committee members were present. We already voted on SB 1386. That was an item action that we took today. And then we had we were going to have a presentation on the administrative support, but that was going to be done at this meeting.
Oh.
And I just realized that didn't happen. It was going to be, it was deferred this morning to this afternoon's meeting.
Huh. Anybody have any enlightenment on that?
No, that was Marlene's item.
No, may I offer a correction or a modification to that? So we did have a presentation by Mike Ambrose in the committee on clerical. What we deferred was Marlene's legislative update.
Okay, I was confused. That's normal for nowadays, you know. Hey. So we had the report, we listened, and we had one person call on from public comment to provide information.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Okay. Just a little video meeting fatigue, I assume, setting in. All right. Item 13, items for future consideration. Please submit any items for future consideration to the general manager, which would include a reminder for questions or areas that you want to see considered in our May 26th workshop. And then item number 14, director comments. Are there any director comments? Director Patterson, are you indicating an interest in making a comment? Just popped on the screen.
Most of my comments I've already addressed, and that was the fact that many of our staff, along with frontline staff, is really being recognized in the media and all around. And I just wanted us to be sure that the discussions we're having with staff don't get misinterpreted, because the staff out there is doing an adequate job, more than that, on the front line. And I always like to salute the work that's being done. We never had a COVID, but our staff's been on the front line of many of the outstanding recognition awards and write-ups and whatnot for their work all around the world, not just here. If we think about down south in New Orleans area, if we think about years ago, our efforts overseas with Australia, if we think about our contributions to Japan and China, I'm saying our staff has really gone on a voluntary basis to do many of these things. And they're not going to shirk their responsibility in the COVID. So I just don't want it to get misinterpreted. And whatever conversations we're having are in-house. And I'm sure at the end of the day, we'll all rise to the occasion. That's all.
Thank you, Director Patterson. I think your sentiments are echoed by all of us. That, and I actually want to commend our Public Affairs Office too for a lot of strong messaging and support of our workforce out in the field, and thank all of our staff for hanging in there and really doing their best in this situation. Okay, hearing no other board members wishing to speak, we will now adjourn. Our next meeting of the board will be held on May 26, 2020 at 1:15 p.m. Thank you,
Don't
everyone.
forget
Saturday.
Oh, actually, our board will convene this Saturday for there's a mistake on my idiot sheet here. The board will convene this Saturday at 9:30 a.m. In a special closed session, which of course will be opened with a short open session. And that meeting, Madam Secretary, is noticed, and the information for people to call in will be provided on our website.
Correct. The notice will be prepared. I'm hoping to get that prepared by Thursday evening, no later than Friday, because I have 24 hours to notice a special meeting. And so it will be posted on our website, and the public portion of the meeting will be audio streamed, and the public will be able to call in and participate just like they do for the public portion of our closed session meeting today.
Okay, I just want to note some audio issues associated with what you just said, but I think everybody understood it, but there were some
I have on a mask.
dropped. Okay, so we are adjourned until our closed session meeting on Saturday, May 16th. I think that's right. And our next regular meeting, open meeting of the board will be held on May 26, 2020 at 1:15 p.m. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.